Hello, friends. Here we are with the Daneberg, the House Dane Iceberg. And though you may question how there is enough to do a whole iceberg on House Dane, oh, there is. Oh, there is. That's right. Plenty to talk about. And of course, House Dane acts as a window into the backstory and into some of George's very biggest external influences on Ice and Fire. Lord of the Rings, Elric of Melnibone, King Arthur, and a couple other things. So, lots to talk about today. We're going to also do some character analysis of the four Danes who are sort of involved in the current story. Ashara, Arthur, of course, Lord Edric Dayne and Darkstar. And we'll talk about theories. We'll talk about historical characters. So, gonna cover it all. We're not gonna go over the Great Empire of the Dawn for 3 hours. We did a whole Great Empire of the Dawn iceberg. We will, of course, talk about it because it has a lot to do with House Dane, but we'll be talking about it specifically in a way that is central to House Dane as opposed to the Great Empire of the Dawn. So I'll have some different stuff for you, a couple of new thoughts and ideas, and yeah, it's gonna be a good one. I'm very excited. I'm just going to pull my tea bag out of my teacup here. That sounded like a PayPal coming through. And also, at some point today, Faye Fire will be joining me, probably in the second hour, to bring a little more Arthurian expertise to correct whatever dreadfully wrong things that I say. No, I'm kidding. I won't say any dreadfully wrong things. I'll try not to. Anyway, but yeah. So, we're going to start off. You can see the topic list on the left, kind of just what I was saying there. And then, yeah. So with the characters, I'm going to introduce the main characters, and then we're going to go back for the analysis. That's why Arthur, Ashara, Edric, and Darkstar are on there twice. The first one is sort of an intro, and the second one will be going back for them. And then we'll also talk about like theories about who Ashara could be if she's still alive and stuff like that. We're going to get that. Don't worry. So, yeah. Starting off with the basics. Location. House Dane is situated at the mouth of the River Torrentine at the foot of the Red Mountains. They are in Dorne, but just barely. And they are separated from most of Dorne by a desert. So, like, for example, your Sunspear, your Planky Town, all that stuff is on the far side of Dorne where Nymeria landed. We're going to talk about Nymeria a little bit today. But, yeah, Dorne's on the other side. They're in the mountains. And, of course, those are the stony Dornish. They are blonder and paler as opposed to, obviously, the Rhoynar are more Mediterranean colored, if you will. And they are a sort of Spanish, Moorish, vaguely inspired Egyptian, the kind of thing. So they come and so it's when you go basically towards Sunspear, you're going to find more of that influence. And World of Ice and Fire breaks it out, the sandy Dornish, stony Dornish, and salty Dornish. But basically, there are some paler, blonder people in the mountains. And then as you go down, you're going to turn more into that Rhoynish influence. So let's see here. Their location is important for a couple reasons. Starfall is located on an island in the mouth of the river, which is a good place to put a fortress, although you do need a certain amount of naval capacity in order to really make that work. And yeah, we're going purple. In fact, actually, I forgot, in honor of House Dane, I do have a little more purple to go with here. Because Dawn, folks, it's large. It's a big white sword. Not sure if it would look like a big stick. Okay, hang on. Gotta get all this happening. No, how is this? Okay, well, you saw it. Never mind. It's actually kind of warm anyway. So, I might have ADHD. Anyways, maybe I'll put it on later. So, Starfall, yeah, it's at the mouth of the River Torrentine, the Red Mountains of Dorne. And, of course, the Tower of Joy is kind of on the other side of the Red Mountains. So that's going to be interesting because, of course, Ned goes to Starfall after the Tower of Joy. And that's really not too far. All right, so, yeah. The journeys of young Ned Stark. Yeah, I might, maybe. Just maybe. So the first Danes, of course, the first Danes followed the track of a falling star to Westeros, as you can see on the far left side of your screen. There's your falling star. And it's not really said where they came from or how they came. But like I said, there is... Oh, kind of mark where Starfall is. So Starfall, I think you can see my mouse here on the map. It's right here. So if you look all the way on the far left side of Dorne, and you see that river inlet right there, Starfall is right at the mouth of the river inlet there. So that's Starfall. It is labeled on the map. Sorry if it's tiny. So yeah, mayhaps. Mayhaps. Okay. So the Danes follow the track of a falling star. And it's kind of implied that Starfall is where they found it. It's not specifically said. This is a very old legend. It's supposed to be Dawn Age stuff. So before the Long Night, in all likelihood. I'm going to go ahead and suggest that they probably came here by sea and not by land. They don't seem to be quite like the rest of the First Men. And again, if you're building a city on an island in the mouth of a river, that's something you do when you have boats, if you will. And then, of course, they have the sword, Dawn, which is like Valyrian steel, but not. So it's indestructible, supposedly. It's, George has imbued it with great prowess. He has said that, if you're fighting with Dawn, you have a big advantage. They asked him, what sword would you want? If you're fighting in Westeros. And, Dawn. If you have Dawn, you have an advantage. So it's implied it might even be better than a comparable Valyrian steel sword. But it's at least similar too. And the weird thing is that it's not coming from Valyria or, the Targaryens. It's coming from this very old First Man house that came to Westeros potentially in a unique way, different from the other First Men. So it all kind of fits in that it doesn't fit. The Danes are different. Their sword doesn't fit with the ancient technology of Westeros. So something is obviously up. And something has obviously always been up with them. And like I said, we're going to talk about the Great Empire of the Dawn. But long before we got the World of Ice and Fire that filled in the information we needed to make that theory, people were speculating that the Danes, maybe, were they Valyrians? Did they have a common ancestor with Valyria? Something like that. Some people even got as close as speculating maybe there were dragon lords before the Valyrians. And that's the common ancestor of the Danes and Valyria. So this is... People were talking about this after the first couple books. This is like before I ever read any books or wrote any theories or anything. Pre-2014. Pre-2011, actually, I should say. So, before Dance with Dragons, before the World of Ice and Fire. So the first Danes, they have Dawn. They have this tradition called the Sword of the Morning. We know Arthur Dayne is the Sword of the Morning. There's a few others where I'll talk about them. Basically, only the most valiant and worthy knights of House Dayne can be named the Sword of the Morning. There doesn't always have to be one. You have to earn it. It's implied. We don't know if there is a Lady of the Lake or a council of Dane women who decides and takes a vote, or if you have to go do some great deed. We don't know. But somehow, occasionally, it is appointed to some Dane to be a Sword of the Morning. Then you get to carry Dawn, this and that. We don't know much else except for that it is a thing. And yeah, I should plug my PayPal. Thank you. And there was a super chat. Let's do it all. Jamie Egg, thank you for the contribution. Welcome to Squisher. Roberto. Jamie asks, Arthur Dayne might have worn Rhaegar's armor on the Trident. His face there was described as beautiful as the dawn sunrise. So I'm not... No. This is all I can say. In my opinion, no. I'm not going to be going down a lot of rabbit holes of like, oh, somebody could have been glamored. Like, if there's a glamour happening, there's going to be clues about the glamour, like Melisandre's near, and there's a ruby, like, I'm not into theories where the hidden identities are there. And like the theory depends on someone just magically being someone else. Rhaegar's definitely dead. Arthur Dayne is almost certainly dead. And I'm going to explain why I think Arthur is definitely dead. But Rhaegar is absolutely dead. And the first reason why Rhaegar is definitely dead is because there's no room in the story for him. You don't need to go down any other branches, in my opinion. Rhaegar's absence from the story is what creates room for Jon and Dany, so that he doesn't need to come back. And there's lots of elderly counselors to send the information. Like, Rhaegar's a tragic character. His death is a defining part of his character in the story. And Arthur Dayne is definitely not Qhorin Halfhand or Mance Rayder, and I'll tell you why, but a little bit later. With all due respect, that is my opinion. And then, yes, the PayPal link is below. That is the best way to support the program. If you do that, you can include your question, and then I will get to it at my leisure. See, that's another nice thing about the PayPal is I never miss any PayPal questions because they sit in my email until I get to them. So, yeah, the link is in the description, but any contributions are appreciated. And simply you being here, watching the video, liking and subscribing is appreciated. Moving on. So, the Danes actually used to be kings. They used to wear a crown. They were kings of the Torrentine until Nymeria, which is only about 700 years ago. So, Arthur Dayne is Sweet Robin. Yeah, Arthur Dayne isn't the High Sparrow. Definitely not. See, here's the thing, okay? Famous people are recognizable. And you will hear people try to say, oh, no, it's not true. Like, people forget faces and they didn't know them very well in the medieval ages. Not like us where we see, like, no. Arthur Dayne is famous as, Rhaegar. These people can't hide. And George, you can tell because George shows us Jon Connington. Jon Connington is a lord. He was Hand of the King. He's been at many tournaments. People know his face. So, when he needed to fake his own death, he had to go to Essos. You see what, and dye his hair. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't send Arthur Dayne to the wall and have him hang out for years and think that nobody's going to catch on. Because if you're trying to hide the identity of Rhaegar or Arthur Dayne, it's very, like, you can't take any chances that someone's going to figure it out. And lots of people have seen him. So this is why, like, these people can't be alive. They definitely can't be characters like Qhorin Halfhand or Mance Rayder, who also served at Eastwatch for many years. Yeah. So yeah, Jon Connington kind of shows you, like, if you want to fake your death, you have to leave Westeros. Yeah, so we are going to talk about Jon and Dawn. We are going to talk about some Tower of Joy and Ashara stuff, so yeah, we'll get into some of that. So they used to be kings until 700 years ago. So they were kings much longer than they were not kings. They were kings for thousands of years, and for the last 700, they have been not kings. So that is something that sticks around as far as the way you think about yourselves. House Dayne may not be as prestigious as some other houses in terms of wealth, or like controlling vassals. Like, they're not the head house of Dorne like the Martells. But we do see them suggested as royal marriages a couple of times, or marrying Targaryens. And we see that they are, in fact, a house with a lot of prestige. They carry themselves that way. They're tall and beautiful and impressive, and Arthur Dayne is the greatest knight, and Elric Dayne was the greatest knight, and so on and so forth. So they used to be kings. You can imagine they're prideful people. They have a lot of honor. Their whole house is built around this tradition of bestowing this sword to the most honorable members of their house. So, yeah, they're not really said to be a wealthy house, but, they're wealthy enough. But it's more about this tradition and about dawn and this honor and this potentially magical secrets. And that's why they're cool. That's why we liked him. Also because Ashara is such a compelling and tragic character. And it seems we have our first PayPal. Thank you, Sam. Praise Garth. It's interesting, in Arya's last chapter, she notes the weirwood chairs in the lower levels of the temple, the many-faced gods. What's their connection to the weirwoods? Well, that's probably outside of the stream purview today, but the entire house of black and white symbolizes the inside of the weirwood net. It shows us the others and the green seers. It's kind of all there. In fact, I've gone into it in my Arya stream, or my Arya series, Weirwood Goddess. There's an Arya-specific episode in there. But that is essentially what's going on. It's mostly symbolism. It's also the fact that the Faceless Men do collect and use any kind of magic they can get their hands on. And the face swapping stuff they do seems to be what the Boltons used to do. So they're using all kinds of magic, as well as glamours. It's okay, Sam. No, it's fine. You sent a second PayPal to say that was off topic. My bad. It's okay. It's okay, brother. I can handle it. So the last thing is that the Danes are Valyrian looking, occasionally, kinda, sorta. Darkstar is the most flagrant. His hair is like a silver glacier with a streak of midnight black in the middle, and his eyes are very dark purple. Arianne has seen them up close, so she knows. Wink, wink. Edric Dayne, his hair is ash, which is kind of a metallic-looking, pale blonde color. You can look up examples of ash hair if you're not familiar exactly what people mean by that, but it's definitely a variant of the metallic Targaryen hair. His eyes are large and pale blue. They look purple in some light, so it matches Egg's eyes, which are large and pale and either look blue or purple. And then we've got, let's see, what other Valyrian Danes? Well, Ashara Dayne has purple eyes, of course. And, well, we'll talk about Diana Dayne when we get there. So they have Valyrian looks cropping up. George has clarified in an interview, they do not have Targaryen blood. There is no Targaryen in House Dayne. That is not the explanation for their purple eyes. So any theories, there is a theory that some Targaryen became a Dane, and that's why Darkstar looks the way he is. And you can understand why people will come up with theories like that. Because Darkstar looks like, Arianne even says, he looks like a Dragon Lord. So people are like, whoa, how did that happen? But no, there's no Targaryen in Dane. The answer is they have a common ancestor with the Targaryens, which of course we'll talk about. Yes, okay. Oh, thanks, Josh. That was very generous of you. Let's see what Josh asked. Oh, Josh is coming heavy. With a generous PayPal, Josh says, Rhaegar is Mance Rayder. He is the king beyond the wall. In Bael the Bard fashion, he raided the Mance of Winterfell to see Lyanna and later to check on Jon. He is the elder brother of Dany. He was Arthur Dayne's lover, and Arthur slipped on the ruby armor to fight on the Trident. Well, that is a whole set of headcanon there. Elder brother of Dany. So that's a Dany isn't who she is also theory. Obviously, Mance and Rhaegar both do parallel Bael the Bard. We've talked about that a bunch. And so the one part about this that I think could be true is Arthur Dayne and Rhaegar being lovers. I have wondered about that. We know Jon Con is in love with Rhaegar. It's obviously not requited, but one wonders, like, did he just have this crush on Rhaegar because Rhaegar was beautiful? Or maybe because Rhaegar also did like guys? It's not impossible. There's not really any evidence for it other than that, though. So it's very speculative. I have wondered, though. They are besties. They're definitely besties. But look, guys can be besties without you know, you don't got to ship everybody that's best friends. So, who knows? Who knows? I mean, Rhaegar married 2 women, so I don't know that he needs more lovers. But, you know, if you want to write that fan fiction, then more power to you. But again, I don't see how Rhaegar can be Mance Rayder, simply because Rhaegar is the most recognizable of any of them. And it's like, I don't think you can glamour your looks for years on end like that. Unless you're completely given to sorcery, like Melisandre. And we don't get that sense from Mance. Mance also is such a strong character, and I think it kind of destroys his character to be like, oh, he's actually Rhaegar. I don't see the point. Yeah, so I'm strongly against all these theories with respect. Maybe one day I'll have to do a stream to really go into them in depth, but those are my main reasons. There's not room for Rhaegar in the story. People will recognize him. I don't think a glamour is going to last that long. Mance is his own character, and it's okay for Mance to play a father figure role to Jon. It doesn't mean that he's Rhaegar. And they both do parallel Bale the Bard, but that's symbolism and archetype stuff, not secret identity. And Dany being a Targaryen, I mean, I guess she's still a Targaryen according to this, but well, I mean, she is. Hold on, what are you saying? The elder brother of Dany. Well, that is true. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying Dany was somebody else. No, obviously they're brother and sister. Okay. Brennan says, how many chapters do you think we'll get of Starfall? It'll be fun to see Arya's PV chapters and the effects later on as a King's Landing plotline. I wonder. So, yeah, they're going to beard Darkstar in his den as I stroke my beard, which is High Hermitage. That's just above Starfall. But yeah, we could see Starfall in that POV. Kirsty, you're trouble. You're trouble. Mance sounds like mansion, which is like red door. No, I can't follow you on that. I can't do that. So next slide. Let's move along here. Dawn is Lightbringer. I put this at the beginning because it's just one of those things. As soon as you hear about it, you're like, oh, is that Lightbringer? The Sword of the Morning? And I've gone all around with it, but yes, it's got to be Lightbringer in some sense. It has to be. It's just dumb if it isn't. So I put don't overthink it, but like the name, it's all in the name. So this is all about Venus, as you know. Venus is the morning star. It ushers in, it's the herald of the sun. And so Venus has a lot of nicknames, right? Even though it's a planet, it's the brightest star in the sky. It looks like a star, and it's 4 times brighter than the next brightest star. So it is much brighter than all the other stars, and it has its own unique way that it moves. For 200 and some days, it rises just before the sun, and then seems to disappear as the sun, brightens the sky. And then it flips, and then it seems to it comes out first at night and then sets into the horizon. So there's rising from the underworld and falling from heaven action. And that leads to mythology about Jesus descending from heaven, ascending to heaven. Lucifer kicked out of heaven and then down to hell, but rising up against God to fight God. So Quetzalcoatl, same thing. The hero twins go down to the underworld and they come back up. And they're reborn a bunch of times. So, for this reason, Venus has many nicknames, and there are translations in different languages, Latin and Greek and even Hebrew. But basically, it's called the Sun of the Morning because it is, again, the brightest star in the morning, but it's not the sun. So if the sun is the father, the morning star is like the son of the sun. It's a mini sun. And often we see that setup where in somebody's religious mythology, the father god will be likened to the sun, and his son will be compared to the morning star. Jesus is compared to the morning star, and God the Father is compared to the sun. Jesus is compared to everything, but the morning star is one of them. So son of the morning is one of the names of Venus. And obviously, dawn is called sword of the morning. Now, dawn is sunrise. So the Greeks have different names for the sunrise and the morning star. So Eos is the goddess of the dawn, while the morning star is called Lucifer, or in Greek it would be Phosphorus and Hesperus, as instead of Lucifer and Vesper. But the point is, son of the morning, sword of the morning. Sword of the morning is a variant of son of the morning, so it's a name taken from Venus. Another name for Venus is, of course, Lightbringer, because Venus rises before the sun and seems to bring in the sun. So Lightbringer, son of the morning, Dawnbringer, herald of the dawn, all that stuff. And this is how I got my channel name. I used to go by the name Lucifer Means Lightbringer, and that is why. This is all why. Because, well, the reason really why I took that name was because uncovering all this mythology about how the Christian devil was created, from the green man and all this other stuff, kind of set me free from some of the last bits of religious guilt that I had. The fear of hell that's like driven into you when you're a kid, right? And it's like, the devil really isn't real. Hell isn't real. This is mythology. So that's why I took it as my name, because it was a light-bringing revelation for me. But I've talked about that a bunch, so. Hey, Terry. Glad you could catch a stream. Thank you. Might need to praise Garth and clear the pipes here. I got a squisher in there. So, son of the morning, everything about Dawn's mythology is referring to Venus. And the word Lightbringer is another name for Venus. So what I'm trying to say is, from Venus mythology, you get Sword of the Morning and Lightbringer, both. So is Dawn Lightbringer? Yeah, it kind of has to be. And it makes sense. Like, the Valyrian steel weapons are magical. They probably kill the others. But now we've got this white one. It's like, what's that do? It's the only one of its kind. It's the most unique magical sword in the story. Is it Lightbringer? Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, the last hero is said to have had a magic sword of dragon steel. And, of course, any sword made out of a comet or meteorite, not a comet, like, what is a comet rock called? A meteor, when it lands, is called a meteorite. When they find a piece of a comet, what is that? A cometite? I've never heard. Actually, it's funny, I don't know what the word is for that. Do we have any geologists in the crowd? Oh, yes, and thank you for telling me, yes. The concept of the devil and hell are not in the Hebrew Bible, not in the Old Testament. It's a New Testament thing. It's mostly from Zoroastrianism, which is why R'hllor seems so demonic. Like, Zoroastrianism had a huge influence on the Middle East. And so the concept of hell that appears in a lot of different religions comes from Zoroastrianism. The Middle East was an incredible cross-pollination of mythology and culture for its entire existence. That's something that is really true. Comets don't crash. When they crash, they're meteorites. I guess. A comet by net doesn't land on a planet. Only meteors do. I see. So if a comet impacts, then it becomes a meteorite. Bolide. Yeah, I like bolide. I think that might be correct. Anyway. And then the last part is the Night's Watch oaths. The Night's Watch, their whole identity... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't finish with Dragonsteel. So, well, this leads to the Night's Watch. The last hero has a magic sword. It's called Dragonsteel. Now, a comet sword could be Dragonsteel, obviously. And Valyrian steel is... A comet piece is called a coma. Huh. I've not heard that. Since Dawn is similar to Valyrian steel, that's another reason why it could be dragon steel. We don't know what Dawn is, but the thing that it's similar to are literally swords made in dragon fire. So was Dawn made with dragon fire by an ancient dragon? Maybe. Was it made without blood magic and that's why it's white and not black? Maybe. It seems a little bit of a literal interpretation, but who knows? Thank you to the Sothorian. But the thing is that the last hero and the Night's Watch is all based around defeating the Long Night, right? The War for the Dawn. The Night's Watch oaths, I am the sword in the darkness, the light that brings the dawn. And we fought the War for the Dawn with dragon steel. These are all the same words and concepts that come from Venus as Dawn and Sword of the Morning. The light in the darkness, the light, or the sword in the darkness, the light that brings the dawn. So it's a sword of light battling in the darkness in the hands of the Night's Watch to end the night and bring the dawn in the war for the dawn. So yeah, Dawn, Lightbringer, Dragonsteel. It's all got to be the same. It really does. I do think there were two potentially Lightbringer swords, but Dawn is definitely one of them. Asteroids. Who knows? Kernu knows. So there you go. It's probably Lightbringer. All the Dawn language is comparable to the Night's Watch oaths. So right from the beginning, we're led to believe that there is some connection between Dawn and the Danes and the last hero. And again, just the fact that it's such a unique, anachronistic sword that's in ancient Westeros. Like, what's it doing there? It's the only Valyrian steel-like sword of its kind in ancient Westeros that we know of. And the last hero had some incredible sword that he was able to defeat the others with. So that's why I said, don't overthink it. George is not, he is not Dave and Dan. He does not lead you to think something and then just pull the rug out for you, from under you and go, ha, I tricked you, we're subverting expectations. It doesn't do that. Like, if he's subverting expectations, he's doing it the whole way. The whole way. Okay? So, stories make sense. George's stories especially make sense, in my opinion. What are you saying, Anu? Oh, you're talking about multiple things at once. Okay, I'll let you cook, baby. I really want to have Anu on a stream, but he's shy. He won't come on. In fact, he might disappear now that I've said his name. I love you, buddy. You're awesome. I want to ride in your Porsche. You got to take me on a Porsche ride sometime, man. We got to do that. Let's see. We've got... Oh, Kelly Johnson has showed up. Whose life force will be used by Jon to supercharge Dawn for the final battle with the others? We'll get there in about 2 hours, Kelly. We'll get there. I will answer that question, though. I think I saw one here. Yes. Do you think we'll see Edric Dayne again in any significant way? Was he just a divisive way to stray the readers? What's his deal? Future Sword of the Morning, maybe. So, yeah, we'll talk about Edric. We will. We're going to talk about him several times, both as a character and about what he might do. So I will save that for where it sits in the outline. But yes, we'll get there for sure. So real quickly, our characters in the story. And I'm going to do this real fast because you guys know this. Arthur Dayne is the Sword of the Morning at the time of Robert's Rebellion. It's not really said how old he is, but he's implied to be in the prime of life, probably pretty young. Him and Ashara have an older brother who is Edric Dayne's father. So Arthur's not the oldest. And so he's probably in his 20s. And this, I haven't been crediting the artist. Let me go back and do the artist real quick. So this map is by Michael Gelatli, yes. And Starfall is by Fran Vegas. Fran Vegas is awesome, by the way. You should follow him on Insta. He did that really cool crypt statue art. This one is by Max Beach Creative. pretty unique piece of art. I like to use it a lot because it's kind of symbolic. And this one is Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy by Mobo Bohm. This is probably the best picture of Dawn that you're going to find. You can even see the Dane sigil on the hilt if you look close. There's two of them, a circle inside the circle with the comet and the sword. And then there, and I've never noticed that until just now. And then you can see the ripples in the steel, but they're sort of like little light glimmers. I mean, this is sick. This is sick here. Bob Barker's The Price is Right. Oh, did he die? Rest in peace. Definitely watched some Price is Right when I was a kid. Who killed Septon Moon? Oh, that's too off topic for today. We will get to Septon Moon when we do a preview of the rest of, no, Septon Moon is Magor. Yeah, and I don't know, Kelly. We did a whole stream about it, and it's really hard to say. And then, where do you and Tony Teflon differ when it comes to big points for the War for the Dawn? I have no idea. I don't know what his headcanon is. If you want to ask me about a specific point, I could answer, but I don't know what Tony's headcanon is about that. So Arthur Dayne, he's said to be the deadliest of King Aerys' Kingsguard by Ned. So his prowess is unmatched, and he's got the best sword. So basically unkillable as far as a human can be, or warrior can be. Not unkillable, but just very hard to beat. And of course, he was at the Tower of Joy as one of the 3 knights at the Tower of Joy, along with Sir Gerald Hightower, the commander of the Kingsguard, and Oswell Went. 7 against 3. We know the story. And he was, of course, Rhaegar's best friend. Now, guys, I will just say, if you're asking questions that don't have anything to do with the Danes, I'm probably not going to answer them today. So just keep that in mind. I will do an open Q&A soon. I just did one recently. But, yeah, I really can't get into, like, Aegon's letter and stuff like that. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to clear my throat here. So that's Arthur Dayne. We know what's up with him. But we're going to come back for the character analysis. Just want to sketch out the basics. And we come to Ashara Dayne. On the left is Satellite Ghost, the artist. On the right, the artist is Abend86. Interestingly, her eyes are described as haunting when Ned remembers them, and laughing in the Tale of the Night of the Laughing Tree. She has laughing violet eyes. Other times she has, oh, and also Barristan says haunting. Haunting. So they're either laughing or haunting, but their violet eyes. Can more swords like Dawn be forged? Probably not. Oh, well, if there's another meteor that causes the next long night, maybe. That's actually an idea I haven't thought about. Embarrassingly, Music Box. Forging a new meteor sword. That actually would make a ton of sense. Yeah, that would. That would make a ton of sense. I'll have to follow up on that. It's a good thought. She is Jon's red herring mom, in that she is used as a cover story. Ned's soldiers spread the story when Ned gets back to Winterfell. That was probably intentional. And it makes sense why she would be used as a cover story for Jon, because they didn't know if Jon would have Targaryen looks as he got older. And if they say Ashara is his mom, and his eyes turn out to be dark purple, they have a cover story for that. I've explained Dayne and Hightower at the Tower of Joy. Why was Went there? Are you asking in a symbolic sense, Sothorian? I kind of was thinking about this last night. I don't know. Dayne and Hightower are both Great Empire of the Dawn, where Went is not. Went is from Harrenhal, though. And Harrenhal is a very interesting symbolic place. And the bat is very much a death symbol. But I couldn't really say too much else. He is the one of these 3 that could still be alive as Old Man Kettle Black. Maybe. I've seen that theory. That's interesting. But I'm not sure what the point would be. Is the audio super clippy for anyone else? Let me try to set something here. Let me see if I can. I should have an yeah, it says it's on high quality. So I'm not sure. Yeah, my audio is fine. Okay, yeah, maybe just a couple of people. Might be your connection. Try refreshing. Also try checking the settings. Sometimes YouTube just automatically sets you to a low bit rate on your phone or something, and you have to go in there and select high quality. So try that. And let me know if that helps. So, all right. So Ashara Dayne, of course, commits suicide. She jumps into the sea after Ned brings Dawn back to Starfall and brings news of Arthur's death. She also miscarried, supposedly a stillborn daughter. That we'll talk about if that's not true, but supposedly that's the story we have. Potentially heartbroken over somebody that she loved. We don't know who, maybe Ned. But we know that she was told about Arthur's death and she had a miscarriage. And then supposedly she leapt from the Pale Stone Sword Tower into the sea. Barristan says, oh, that fixed it for you. Yeah. I don't know why YouTube does that. It does it more too now, where it automatically sets you to low quality and you have to pick high quality. Sir Barristan says that Dany's eyes remind him of Ashara's eyes. And of course, Ashara has violet eyes, so it could be that. Simply the color. Or it could be the actual shape and look of them as well, because the Danes might have a common ancestor with Valyria. So that's the basics on Ashara. Now, younger sister of Arthur and Ashara is Illyria Dayne. This is the woman that Beric is betrothed to. All right? Edric's aunt. So she is younger. And she's actually probably very young. She's probably about 15 or 16 now, because she was betrothed to Beric 5 years ago, when Ned Dayne was 7, and Ned Dayne is 12 now. So, 5 years ago, she's betrothed to Beric. And at the time of the current story, they are still betrothed. They are not married. So why would the betrothal carry on so long without being married? Because she was too young. That is the only answer I can come up with. So she is probably about the same age as Ned Dayne, actually. Or maybe just a hair older. But she can't have been older than 16 at the time of the story when it begins, or she would have married Beric by then. So by now she might be 17 or 18, depending on how much time has passed. But I think she must have been like 12 or 13 when she was betrothed. And that's why they're still betrothed. And Beric, by the way, would have been, he's like 22 in the story. So Beric would have been like 17 and betrothed to Illyria, who's like 12. And that kind of makes sense in a medieval context. You'd betroth people of that age, let them get a little older, and then they'd marry when they're 22 and 17 or whatever it is. So that's probably about her age. I do call her Illyria Valyria. And now you can too, okay? And there's a kind of a funny thing. When Beric is telling Arya after his 6th resurrection, and he's talking to Arya like, oh, I had a castle once and a woman I was betrothed to, but I can't remember where that castle is or what the color of the woman's hair is. And that is George poking us about the Danes and their hair color. Because some of them have Valyrian looks, but like we don't know what all of their looks are. And Ashara Dayne had dark hair, whereas Darkstar has the silver hair, right? So it's like, oh, I can't remember what color Illyria Dayne's hair is. I took it as a joke anyway. But yeah, that's about all we know of her, is that she is a younger sister of Arthur and Ashara and whoever Ned's father is, who would be the oldest. Because Ned Dayne is the Lord of Starfall now. So his father would have been an elder brother to all these other ones. And he must be presumably dead. We don't know his name or who he is. So next is aforementioned Edric Dayne. Oh, sorry, this is by Ray Laverne. Ray Laverne from Tumblr. Okay, so the artist on this one on the left is Eluas, or Elaus, E-L-U-A-S. I'm not sure how to say that, but they do a lot of good art of Ice and Fire. And the upper right is M. Luisa Giliberti, and the lower right is Amati. So obviously the lower right is Ned and Arya, and the upper right is Ned squiring for Beric. So Ned Dayne is Beric's squire for the last 5 years. He became Beric's squire when Beric was betrothed to his aunt, Illyria. Ned Dayne is named for Ned Stark, which is interesting because Ned's real name is Edric, and Ned Stark's name is Eddard. So Edric is considered a variant of Eddard. It's interesting because it just makes Eddard another Elric name, which we'll get to. He has been a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners since it existed, because obviously he was Beric's squire, and Beric formed it. Let's see. If Illyria Dayne is around 16, do you think she could secretly be the child Ashara supposedly miscarried, passed off as a sister? Yes. It hadn't occurred to me, Gerald Garcia, but yes, I suppose that could be. And I do want to say that Illyria Dayne is kind of like not the gun on the shelf that needs to fire, or by any means. But she is a character that George could make use of. Like, she could appear at court and play a role, in Fagon's court or something. She is somebody that, much like Melora Hightower, the Mad Maid, who's only been mentioned in one line. If George wants to make her Chekhov's gun, thank you. If George wants to make Melora Hightower a character in the last 2 books, he can. Not a POV character, but just more of to play some role. Illyria Dayne could also. I don't know how she could be Val. You guys are trying to break my brain with this stuff. Val is Val. I strongly dislike that. I do not think Val is Dayne. She has a wildling sister, and they've grown up north of the wall. There's nothing in their story about they came from somewhere else or anything like that. So, not a fan of that. Val's just hot. Wildlings can be hot too. Like, that's another reason I dislike that theory. Is like, oh, she's so, the line, oh, she would have been beautiful at any court in Westeros. That doesn't mean she's from a court in Westeros. It just means she's really beautiful. So, now, Ned Dayne, interestingly, defended Beric's corpse in the river, his first death, against the Mountain's forces. He was slain in the river. Ned stood over his corpse and defended it until Thoros could get it, pull it out of the river, and resurrect him. So, and by the way, a theory of Ice and Fire, feel free to talk about it in the chat. I'm not offended by that. Go for it. I just, that's what I think. But yeah, carry on. They're just theories. I could be wrong. You could be right, of course. I'm only giving my opinion. So yeah. Well, we'll talk about Howland Reed. Oh, don't worry. We will, definitely. We'll talk about that. All the potential Ashara identities we'll talk about. The other branch of the Dayne house has not yet had its sigil revealed, Gabe says. Do you think there's something behind it? Well, that's interesting. Yeah, Darkstar. Well, there's so much blank space that George could fill in with High Hermitage. How is Darkstar related? Cadet branch, since when? We don't know any of this stuff. So could be damn near anything. So yeah, Ned Dayne supposedly has not killed anyone, but he has fought in, like when you're a squire and you're in battle, you end up fighting sometimes. Like when your knight falls, you stand over his corpse with your sword drawn, ready to defend him. So he might have fought off some people, we don't know. But he hasn't killed anyone, but he's definitely had a lot of experience. Both, he's got experience like sleeping in a cave, living humbly, and with people who are living up the true values of knighthood, defending the common people, right? And he's also got some combat experience too. Now, last we knew, he is not with the Brotherhood anymore. So he probably went back to Starfall. He went off with a couple different people headed south. So it seems that he is probably headed back to Starfall. The Brotherhood has taken a darker turn, and it seems like some people pieced out. Ned Dayne is the Lord of Starfall, so at some point, he does have to go home. Probably after Beric gave up his flame of life to Stoneheart, that probably released Ned from his duty. So at that point, his duty would be to go back to Starfall and take up the mantle of his house. That's probably where he is. And Ned is 12 at the time of this when Arya meets him, so he's probably 13 now, but he's pretty young. And like I said, his hair is ash blonde, and he has pale blue purple eyes. And then we have Darkstar, and this is Sir Gerald Dane by Bella Bergolts. Darkstar is of the night. He is an edgelord, and some people call him Dorkstar, right? Because he's kind of over the top. We use the term edgelord. Edgelord is perfect for Darkstar. That is exactly what he is. Okay? He has a giant chip on his shoulder. He feels inferior to Arthur Dayne. Yeah, Val is a Valkyrie. That's why she's called Val, because she's a Valkyrie, not a Valerian. I know, it's, similar, but she's definitely a Valkyrie figure. Okay, so we should do a Val stream. I love Val. Maybe a Wildlings stream, something like that. Okay, so he's said to be the most dangerous man in Dorne. So this is what you have to remember. People that are edgelords are dangerous sometimes, even though a lot of it is performative and emo, if you will, and kind of immature. Like having a chip on your shoulder is kind of immature. Hate to break it to you guys. I mean, it's fine if you're young, but like eventually you want to set that motherfucker down. So Darkstar, he's got this inferiority complex, right? The thing is, that does make people dangerous because they're trying to prove themselves. They have this anger and rage sort of bottled up. So it makes him dangerous because he's unpredictable, and he's also an expert swordsman. So he is a loose cannon with very good aim, if you will. That is why he is the most dangerous man in Dorne. It's a combination of the skill and the attitude, the judgment, the decision making. Now, we don't know if he is more of a conniving and plotting figure or more of a hothead. It kind of depends on whether or not he really did slice Myrcella's ear. And also why. It could have been a calculated move. It could have been something he did so that he had a distraction to escape so he didn't get captured. It could have been something he did partially to provoke chaos and instability. Or it could have been something he planned to do. Or it could have been something he's working in concert with Doran Martell about. All these things are possible. And we're going to talk about that in the character analysis round. But yes, he lives in High Hermitage, so he's a high-ass hermit. And there is some Grateful Dead humor going on. Obviously, Darkstar is a Grateful Dead song. whose lyrics we'll get to later. But Darkstar living in High Hermitage is like, yeah, that's very... It's a Grateful Dead joke all the way. It's just been like being a high hermit, living out in the mountains like a hippie. But Darkstar obviously is not. And Sir Gerald, like Jerry Garcia. So he's Jerry Darkstar. It's... But yeah, he might have been framed. It's possible. It's possible. Let me check something here. Question. How there is enough to do a whole iceberg on House Dayne? Yeah. No. Oh my God. Okay. Let me know if the chat is still working. God damn it, dude. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. 1 second. We are muted. We're paused. Okay. All right, guys. Yeah, I don't know why. It seems like a lot of people are having internet problems, but I swear it's... People are resetting and then it's fixing. So, yeah, Sunday evenings are always busy. Let me just double check again any settings that I have that I might be able to... Cannot be changed while streaming. I do have some slow internet happening. Yeah, it's nothing I can do about it though, guys. There's probably just going to be a couple of waves like that. Apologies. Doing our best. Okay, so I did pause. It was playing in a different tab, so this might help a little bit. But so his hair, as we mentioned, it is described as being like a silver glacier divided by a streak of midnight black, which is very interesting for symbolism. We'll get to that later, but it's definitely the most Valyrian looking hair. And again, Arion says his eyes are dark purple, and if they had kids, they'd be as handsome as dragon lords, which is kind of saying Darkstar looks like a dragon lord. So, let me just check and see if we're... I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to close. I had some tabs open. I'll just close those as well. See if that helps. Close, close, close. Okay. That might help a little. We'll see. So yeah, Silver Glacier and Dark Purps would both be good names for strains. I tried to make them sound like that as much as I could. All right, so now we're moving into history. Let me go ahead and praise Garth real quick, and then we'll move on to this next section. Oh, are we live? No, I'm kidding. Reading Rhaegar. Okay, so the first Dane is the first Dane that we hear of, obviously. We don't know his name, but he followed a falling star to Westeros. Who was he? We don't know. From where did he come? The Great Empire of the Dawn. I mean, we don't know. But we know that he was some kind of purple-eyed meteor hunter. right? His descendants, hundreds of years later, still have purple eyes and silver-toned hair. So, silver-haired, purple-eyed meteor hunter. That's who he was. And he was pretty good at metallurgy, or knew somebody who was, because he was able to make dawn, supposedly. Now, I will say that meteorites come with ready-made steel, pretty much. You can cold forge it, meaning you can just hammer it out. The King Tut knife is hammered. And I actually was reading about some pre-Inuit peoples in the Arctic, in the North American Arctic, came over from Siberia like 3000 BC. They established a colony on Greenland because they found a meteor there, and they were harvesting steel off of it for decades, actually. And so they were basically just hammering out the steel and making implements with it. It's very prized. So, yes, dawn is probably not hammered, though. I will just say that. It is not a little knife. It looks like a Valyrian steel sword. It is identical to Valyrian steel. So probably we're not thinking about a cold hammered weapon here. This is probably something that was forged in the sacred fires. But maybe, just maybe, if we're thinking like less magically and more realistically, an ancient meteor sword can be a thing without them having, the steel forging abilities. Because in order to make crucible steel, you've got to make a forge that can reach a certain temperature. I think it's 3,000 degrees. And that is very hard to do. That is why it took a long time for people to make steel, as opposed to bronze, which you can fuse at a much lower. It's an alloy. Bronze is an alloy, but requires a much lower temperature, and thus a less good forge. Okay, so we're the ancient mariners. As I mentioned, you make your fortress at the mouth of a river on an island. It kind of implies you have sea power. And if you're following a falling star, I mean, it's like the three wise men almost, following the star to Jesus's birth. But yeah, it implies that they traveled here quickly, that they came from far away. All of this stuff would kind of make sense if they came by sea, but it's not said. I will just introduce that as a hypothesis. So the difference between iron and steel is that steel is refined iron, and also you have to add a little bit of carbon. And usually it's the source can be something like nickel or trace amounts of other metals. Meteoric iron often comes with a little bit of nickel and other alloys in it. Phosphorus can be one as well, which is interesting because phosphorus is another word that's interchangeable with morning star. And phosphorus, of course, the chemical, what's it do? It lights up, right? It's really bright. It creates light. So that's why it's called phosphorus. There's a couple different ways you could go down as far as how dawn is made. It's a meteorite that contained a lot of white phosphorus, right? Yeah. But like I said, I doubt it was hammered. It probably was forged. It's probably from the Great Empire of the Dawn. We'll get there. But this first Dane, he had some kind of metallurgy, some kind of skill. Oh, this artist, thank you. This is Jose Daniel Cabrera Pen. And the photo of this Geminid meteor is by Wally Pocholka, and I use it a lot. It's the one on the list as well. Wally Pocholka is a great astrophotographer and has a lot of cool stuff. And yes, white phosphorus is also an illegal chemical weapon that's used in war sometimes, and it is like napalm. It's very bad. So that's the first Dane. He's the first Dane we know of. Second Dane we know of, and I used the same picture because this, he is a king and he's from ancient day. So he probably still looked pretty ancient. And we don't have pictures for these historical characters. Spoiler alert. So King Samwell Dane, he was a king of the Torrentine. He was called the Starfire. And he sacked and burned Old Town. Sacked and burned it. So, screw those guys. And we're going to come back to the symbolism analysis of this later. But let's just stick with the plot for now so we can get through these details quickly. He sacked and burned Old Town. Not the only Dane to do that, interestingly. So that's Samwell the Starfire. Interesting that his, Samwell, obviously, we've got Sam Tarly in the story. He's not a Dane, but he's right-hand man to Jon, who might get Dawn in his hands, and is 1/8 Dane. 1/8. Something like that. So that we could see some sort of Samwell echoes there. But yeah, he sacked and burned Old Town. Sam Tarly is in Old Town when Euron's about to sack and burn it. So there's potentially some plot echoes involved here. But yeah, King Samwell Dane, sometime in the past, again, before Nymeria's coming, before the conquest, he sacked and burned Old Town. We don't even know why he did it. We just know that that happened. King Vorian Dane. He is the other named king of the Torrentine, and he is the last king of the Torrentine. And this artwork, by the way, this is actually Darkstar by Hennig Ludvigsen. But today he will be King Vorian Dane. So, there he is, all right? He is called the Sword of the Evening. So much like Darkstar, he's flipping all the dawn, light-bringing Daystar aspect of the Danes into darkness. So it's kind of George doing a thematic thing, telling you like, well, nothing is ever good and pure. The same thing that gives you the light gives you the darkness. But of course, Venus, like I said, it switches between morning star and even star. So it is the evening star sometimes. It's not always the bringing in the day. Sometimes it's bringing in the night. And this also gets into the idea of Azor Ahai, the last hero, the villain and the hero of the Long Night, potentially being related, or father and son. Just like Venus, it can give you both. Matt Diff says, I always think of Dawn and even the white swords in Dany's vision as pre-Long Night magic. Yeah, definitely. And once that original sin came into existence, only blood magic worked. Yeah, swords made in a world broken by sin. I think, at least thematically, that's correct. And we will talk about those swords, obviously, of Dany's vision. But I've neglected the PayPal, and there's several that have come in. So let me see if these fit in the flow here. Scarlet Widow. Looking for a Discord link. We'll hook you up, no problem. Yeah, and by the way, if you're sending me a PayPal and you would like a Discord link, let me know. I'll send it. I think Ashara and Ned did have a thing and a child that died. Do you think the child was Ned or Brandon's? So we will get to Ashara's child and who that was. And if Ned and her were in love. I don't want to take it out of order, but yes, I will answer those questions specifically. Kelly Johnson, what strand of the Great Empire of the Dawn did the Danes come from compared to Lannister's High Towers and the Grey King? I mean, those are the strands. Those are the biggest clues that we have of the different strands. I'm not going to be able to tell you where they came from, inside of the Great Empire. We have no idea. We don't even know if the different emperors are really dynasties and houses as opposed to individuals. So I would just be guessing or writing fan fiction. And of course, I don't want to do that. And we're going to talk about Eärendil. Don't worry. We're going to talk about a bunch of Tolkien stuff today. Joshua says, Dane, Pain, Rain, Costain, Toyne. Am I supposed to say that 5 times fast? Dane, Pain, Rain, Costain, Toyne. Dane, Pain, Rain, Costain, Toyne. Yeah. There, I'm not sure. From Mason, thank you. Tony Teflon says Darkstar is just a pretty bad boy type meant to appeal to women. and ain't that much of a threat compared to the deadly Lyn Corbray. No, I think that's wrong. I think they're similar characters, and they're dangerous for similar reasons. But Lyn Corbray is working for Littlefinger, and Darkstar, might be working for Doran, who's very similar to Littlefinger. That's an interesting comparison. Remember, George might be giving it away there. Littlefinger works with Lyn Corbray. Lyn Corbray pretends to be Littlefinger's enemy because that allows Peter to manipulate things. So that could be the same setup where Darkstar is pretending to be an antagonist to Doran for political reasons. Because Doran doesn't want to be seen as hurting Marcella, but he could get Darkstar to do it and then blame Darkstar. So that's kind of the theory behind him working with Doran. I wouldn't say that I favor that theory, but I think it would be a good story if that's the way it goes. That's what I will say about that. But Vorian Dane, he was the last king of the Torrentine. He called himself the Sword of the Evening. So did he wield dawn? We don't know. In fact, actually, guys, an interesting question that I came up with. This tradition of the Sword of the Morning can only be a knight of House Dane. This might be something that's only come up since they are not kings anymore. Because it's likely before, when they were kings, that every king wielded dawn, and that it was passed down as a right of kingship, just like every other ancestral sword, just like Blackfire. But once they're not kings anymore, that's probably when they came up with a different tradition of awarding it to the most worthy knight of their house. So, yeah, I'm guessing that Samwell Dane the Starfire, like, he's not said to be a Sword of the Morning, but he's called the Starfire. Did he wield dawn? I'm sure he did. So King Vorian Dane, the Sword of the Evening, probably carried dawn too. Sword of the Morning was probably originally just a nickname for the king of the Torrentine. In fact, I'm sure that's what it was. It'd be like Vorian Dane, King of the Torrentine. He's Sword of the Evening, but Samwell Dane would have been King of the Torrentine and Sword of the Morning, the Starfire. These are just titles. And eventually, then it became the title of the actual, only the knight who's given the sword. So that is my theory on how that evolved, which I came up with yesterday. So King Vorian Dane, he's the last king of the Torrentine because he opposed Nymeria. And Nymeria and Mors Martell conquered all of Dorne. They unified it, and no one beat them. And Vorian Dane was among the last to resist her. There were 6 kings that were sent to the wall in golden fetters. The Golden Fetter 6, as I like to call them. And Vorian Dane was one of those. So that is an interesting precedent, because when we think about the last hero potentially wielding dawn, this creates a story about someone with dawn going up to the wall and using it. So here, Vorian Dane is being sent to the wall in golden fetters, but it's still somebody who used dawn being sent to the wall. So maybe that is a plot echo of some kind. Either Night's King or Last Hero, one or the other, both of whom could be connected to the Danes and the Great Empire of the Dawn being sent to the wall. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So after Vorian Dane was defeated and sent to the wall, and Nymeria is ruling Dorne, eventually Mors Martell died. And she took another husband, except for it was really like a prince consort, just like Elia is for Oberyn. But essentially they were married, and they had a kid together. Although Nymeria passed the throne of Dorne to her child by Mors Martell. However, Lord Davos Dane, the first non-king, the first Lord Dane, he was Nymeria's third consort. So, pretty cool. And they had a kid together. And he was a Sword of the Morning. And he's described as dashing. So very handsome. Says probably a super hot couple, to be honest. Nymeria, warrior queen of the Rhoynar, unifier of Dorne, and dashing Davos Dane. She's probably older, too. That's hot. I'm sorry. That's a hot one. So if we, 10,000 ships supposedly is in development still, says George Martin as of a couple months ago. Everything's on hold now with the writer's strike. So when that all ends, and support your writers, of course, 10,000 ships will resume development. And yeah, like fourth season of that show, when Nymeria is unifying Dorne at the very end, we'll meet Davos Dane and Vorian Dane. We should meet both of them. Yeah, Sword of the Night, Sword of the Evening, Kolnitsky. Vorian Dane is Sword of the Evening. And then Darkstar is of the Night. So, similar idea. Okay, so that's Davos, dashing Davos Dane. Then we hear about Elric Dane. Oh, I need some artwork. Sorry, this one is by... So the top, this Davos Dane, that's another Darkstar. This is just a more handsome looking Darkstar. So I used him for dashing Davos. That artwork is by the First Angel. Actually, no. I think the First Angel is Nymeria and J.K. Drummond is Davos Dane. But it could be the other way around. Those are the artists, though. So this Elric Dane is yet another Darkstar. And this is by Insolence. And then this is Daemon Blackfire by Mike Hallstein. So we hear about Elric Dane from Sir Eustace Osgrey in The Sworn Sword. And he's talking about Daemon Blackfire. And he's saying, Daemon Blackfire, with Blackfire in hand, there was no match for him. Not even Elric Dane with Dawn. So, Elric Dane is a knight and a Sword of the Morning of his day, of the time of Daemon Blackfire. And much like Arthur Dane, he is sort of a benchmark. He's regarded as the greatest knight in the land, and he has Dawn. So Eustace, who worships Daemon Blackfire, essentially as a way of saying Daemon Blackfire was the warrior himself, he says he even could have beat Elric Dane with Dawn. We don't know if that's true. This is just an old man speculating about what, which fighter would win in a fight. But it just tells you the level of prowess. Elric Dane, one of the greatest fighters of his day, as was Daemon Blackfire. And, of course, Elric Dane is a name taken right from Elric of Melnibone. So he's Elric of Melnibone. I've got more and worse word puns coming, don't worry. Okay, so Joffrey Dane was a knight of Starfall. He was not a Sword of the Morning, just a knight of Starfall. But he must have been a good battle commander, because during the First Dornish War, he led a force of Dane troops to Old Town, where he besieged it. He did not burn Old Town, but he did slay the son of the Lord of Old Town, Lord Hightower. One of his younger sons was Garmin Hightower. And Joffrey Dane slew him. Not with Dawn, because he's not Sword of the Morning, but he slew him in combat, besieged Old Town, and then, Vhagar and Visenya burned Starfall. So, watch out for Nana's wrath. But yeah, Starfall was burnt by Vhagar. And I'm going to resist the symbolism because we're going to come back for the symbolism later. We're going to keep moving. But that's important. All this Old Town stuff is important. And this art is by Ryan Barger. These are Knights of House Dane. So one of these is Joffrey Dane. Then there's Clarisse Dane, or I think it may be Clarice Dane. The reason why I think it might be Clarice is because she was suggested as a wife of Maegor who is very like Hannibal Lecter, right? So I think this is a joke from George. The almost wife of Maegor the Cruel is Clarice Dane, but she dodged a bullet. Fortunately, the suggestion was rejected, and Maegor did not try to marry Lady Clarice Dane, who was the head of House Dane. So this is a clue that the Danes followed Dornish custom, and that women can be the head of House Dane. And she was Lady Clarice Dane, the head of House Dane, during the time of Maegor the Cruel. We have to wonder if she might have been another Dane with Valyrian looks, because that would have made her a better candidate to be someone to marry a Targaryen. If she had either purple eyes or silver hair, then would be an ideal candidate to marry Maegor the Cruel, because the kids might look more Valyrian. So yeah, Clarissa extains it all. That's her. And this is Ashara Dayne artwork, of course. And it's by, shoot. Let me find the artist. I didn't write it down for this one. Always credit your artists, who will always be human on this channel. Oh, that's another one by Eluas. E-L-U-A-S. Yeah. So that's Ashara. But today it's Clarice Dayne. Yeah. Clarice extains it all. Yeah, baby. I told you worse puns were coming. So then we have Diana Dane. And this is, this is actual Diana Dane artwork. On the left, it's Chili Raven art. Of course, you recognize the style. And on the right, it is Natividad Moon is the name of the artist. So, Diana Dane. Just joined the stream, so not sure if you touched on this, but do you feel she'll be important to the story with regards to Ned Brandon, or is she just a red herring? Okay. Yeah, so we're going to do character analysis of Ashara in a bit, and we'll talk about that. So just hang tight. I do think there is an important reveal with Ashara. There has to be, because there's too much that's secret. So this is Maekar Targaryen's wife. This is Egg's mom. She had 6 kids and still somehow died before Maekar took the throne. Maekar did take the throne later in life, but yeah, she was never queen. She is Diana Dayne Targaryen. She married Maekar, so she would have been Diana Targaryen at that point. But Diana Dayne Targaryen married Maekar. She is the mother of Egg. And again, her and Maekar had 6 kids. And 5 out of 6 of them have perfect Valyrian looks. And the one is Daron the Drunkard. He has brown with a streak of silver. So he's still got some Valyrian looks. The reason why this is interesting is because if you go back one generation from Maekar, you have Maria Martell marrying Ares the First. Or was it Daron? It was Daron. Yeah, Daron Targaryen. He married Maria Martell. Oh, this is the wrong Daron. Sorry. Let me just sort this out for you. I know the answer, but I talk myself into being unsure. And I just, no, that's not Maekar. Yeah, Mariah. Okay, Daron and Mariah. So it's Daron the second. Yeah, Mariah Carey Martell. Okay, so Daron the second Targaryen marries Mariah Martell. And they have some kids. The most important kids are Baelor and Maekar. The hammer and the anvil. We meet them in the Mystery Night, okay? Now, Baelor Breakspear Yes, the parents of Baelor Breakspear. That's why Baelor doesn't look Valyrian. Remember, he's got dark, Dornish looks, and this is controversial. Some people are like, ew, Dornish. He doesn't look Targaryen. I don't know if I like that. But his brother Maekar looked Valyrian. So what that means is that even though Maekar looks Valyrian, his mom is Mariah Martell, who is a Martell. Going to be darker skin, black hair, typical Dornish looking, Roynish Dornish looking person. So her kids are kind of half and half. Mariah Martell's kids. Some of her kids are darker, like Baelor Breakspear. Maekar is Valyrian looking. But Maekar has darker colored genes in his genes. They'd be recessive, right? So when he marries Diana Dayne, if Diana Dayne also had like darker hair and more Roynish looks, their kids would not come out all Valyrian. Because Maekar, again, has recessive genes for darker hair. But only one of his kids has anything but silver hair. That's Daeron the Drunkard. The other 5 all have silver hair. So strongly implies that Diana brought a fresh infusion of silver hair and purple eyes into the Targaryen line. And that is why Maekar's kids look more Valyrian than they should. Maybe George isn't thinking about any of this, and periodically he just resets the Targaryens and makes them look Targaryen again. But it strongly implies that Diana Dayne was a Valyrian-looking Dane. And we've seen that a bunch of them do look Valyrian anyway, so it's not like conspiratorial. Now, she is the reason why Dany is 1/4 Dane and why Jon is 1/4 Dane. Because Egg is half Dane, and then he marries Black Betha Blackwood. So their kids are 1/4 Dane, and their kids marry each other. So that basic mixture of half Blackwood, half Targaryen Dane is what is passed down to Rhaegar and Dany. So Dany is half Blackwood, so is Rhaegar, and they are both 1/4 Dane. Now Jon is Rhaegar's son by Lyanna, so he's 1 generation further removed. So he'd be 1/8 Dane, and this is not how genetics works. You do not get 1/4 and 1/8. But just to give you an approximate idea, Dany's background, if she were quartering her heraldry, if you will, she is a 4th Dane and Jon is 1/8. So if there are no Danes at the end of the story to wield Dawn, potentially that blood could be called back to say, actually, Jon is the new Sword of the Morning. It might just be necessity that makes that happen, but we'll get there again. So that's Diana Dayne. Pretty cool character. Yeah, the incest wasn't necessary after the dragons were dead. It still would have been necessary to preserve the looks, which are part of their claim. And it's kind of like, if It's Not Gay in a Three-Way song from SNL. Sometimes it just keeps going, I love that skit. Sorry, but I do. Okay, keep it on. Now we're getting into the character stuff. So let me clear my throat. Yeah, give me 30 seconds here. That was a tasty one. All right. So the first thing when we think about Sir Arthur Dayne, the character, needs some new hold music. I'm sorry. You're not wrong. On one hand, there's no other channel where somebody is making their own funky bass Game of Thrones hold music. Okay, so that's cool. But on the other hand, I have worn that thing out and been promising new music from a long time, and I've been slacking. So I will bring more funk to you. I've been busy making videos about the Ironborn instead. But no, you're right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. No apologies necessary. It's all in good fun. So Sir Arthur Dayne, Rhaegar's bestie. Now, we know that Rhaegar consumed with prophecy, essentially, to the point where he's basing his actions, life choices, running off with Lyanna, taking a second wife, telling Elia that he thinks their son is the prince that was promised and they need a third person. Oh, don't. Everybody loves the hold music. They weren't dissing the hold music. They're just giving me, come on, it's all good. Yeah, no, he is effing dead, Jenny. That's true. So the fact that Rhaegar was so invested in prophecy, and the fact that he seems to have shared his thoughts on prophecy with Maester Aemon, and with definitely Elia, as we see in Dany's vision, his best friend was Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. Like, Rhaegar knows the answer, okay? Whatever the Danes know about their story, which is maybe something I overlooked at the beginning. The Danes know, like, we don't know what the Danes' house words are. Like, we've only seen the Danes from the outside, but they have, I wouldn't change the music. I would just make a new song to rotate in sometimes. The old one would not go away. Fear not. Basically, I'm saying that whatever the Danes know about their sword and about their history, Arthur would have known, and Arthur and Rhaegar would have talked about it. So that is really interesting. What do the Danes know about their own history? What have they passed down for 8,000 years? They've kept Starfall for that long. They've kept this sword for that long. So they're basically an unbroken chain of transmission going all the way back to some time before the Long Night. So they probably know. I mean, some of that history might have been mythicized, but they at least have stories that Rhaegar and Arthur can sit there and pick over. So even if it has been turned into myth and fable, Rhaegar knows, okay? Rhaegar knows. He's reading the prophet. He's reading the deep magic. So those conversations must have been fascinating. Fascinating. And it means that Rhaegar had more knowledge than we're thinking about. It's not just the prince that was promised and stuff like that. He was consulting with Arthur Dayne. So he might have known, like, that Dawn was Lightbringer. Okay? And that might be why Arthur Dayne was at the Tower of Joy guarding Rhaegar's son, whom he then probably thought was now the prince that was promised. Part of that whole setup might have been that Jon is supposed to be named Sword of the Morning or whatever. Like, it might be a coincidence that Dawn was there at the Tower of Joy at Jon's birth, but probably not. It's definitely not an author's coincidence, but even within the story, like, the fact that Rhaegar sent Arthur Dayne to guard Jon. Like, Arthur and Lyanna both knew what was going on with Rhaegar's mindset and understanding of prophecy. And Ned would have known by the time it was all done. So check out the video, What Lyanna Told Ned, for more on that. So, primary conflict for Arthur Dayne. Right, that's what I'm saying, Orange Tabby. They might have some knowledge of the Great Empire of the Dawn. It depends on how good their records are. You know, when the Maesters come, they probably hide the good books. Cheers, Conrad. Appreciate the note there. It's private note, but appreciate the PayPal super chat. Okay, so his primary conflict is that Rhaegar was nice, seemingly. Let's assume so. Okay. They're best friends. So Arthur had a good opinion of Rhaegar. We'll say that. Aerys was obviously at this point descending into Mad King territory, burning people and being paranoid and stuff. So we heard one of the most important bits in this whole story is Jaime Lannister recounting the words of Gerald Hightower, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Arthur's Lord Commander. They're listening to Aerys R-wording his wife, Rhaella. Okay? Remember, she comes out with scratches. She's screaming and crying from behind the door. Awful, awful stuff. Okay? And Jaime, being young, full of piss and vinegar, he's looking at Gerald Hightower like, aren't we supposed to protect the royal family? Shouldn't we do something? And Gerald Hightower is like, we don't protect her from him. He's the king. And later on, we see that mentality internalized within Jaime when he talks about being in the throne room when Aerys was burning people. And Jaime would be like, I would just go away inside and think about Cersei. So he learned that from Gerald Hightower. And what Gerald Hightower is teaching him is very bad, is a very bad mindset. Just turn your moral code off. You are a soldier. Just do what you're commanded to do, even if it seems wrong. And of course, Jaime puts his finger on this. He's like, oh, they make you swear and swear. You have all these oaths, but the oaths conflict. We're supposed to defend the weak and defend women. But I sat there and listened to Aerys rape his wife, and I did nothing because I was supposed to obey. So George is very invested in exposing the rotten truth beneath the glorious white armor of the shining white knights. The Kingsguard are the epitome of that. We've seen many Kingsguard presented as not nice people. Yeah, it's a cult mentality, exactly. And I judge Aerys' Kingsguard very harshly. Like Arthur Dayne, Hightower, Went, all of them. They enabled Aerys' cruelty and madness. They did nothing to stop any of it. And Jaime Lannister killing King Aerys was one of the most moral acts that anyone has committed in the story. Even if Jaime's reasons were not purely altruistic, at some point he was like, no, you're not going to blow up King's Landing. I don't care if I'm disgracing myself and going against orders. I'm not letting you do that. Gerald Hightower would have been like, here's the wildfire, sir. It's my holy vow to, you know. So this is an interesting conflict that all of the Kingsguard of Aerys' day were caught in. And Arthur, more than anyone, because he is best friends with Rhaegar. But Rhaegar's dad is nuts. And we know that Rhaegar was planning on doing something, probably gently deposing his father and taking over. He seemed to be gathering support for that at the Harrenhal tourney before he ran off with Lyanna. Plan B, as it were. I talked about Lyanna. We did the Lyanna stream recently, so check that out for more Lyanna talk. But Arthur Dayne is caught in the middle of whatever future plans Rhaegar has to make a nicer kingdom and the reality of Aerys' rule. Okay. Then we meet Arthur at the Tower of Joy. He's essentially a dead ender. It's a lost cause. Rhaegar's dead. Their war is lost. And yet, these three Kingsguard are at the Tower of Joy, basically ready to die, because even if they beat Ned and his 6, more people will come. And they're just going to stand there, the three of them, and defend Lyanna against all comers until they die. It's a very suicide pact-y kind of thing. And it's made out to be this stiff kind of honor. but George is definitely exposing it as a hollow kind of honor. Like, what's it really worth? What's the point? The greatest knight in the kingdom threw his life away. And these other two men, Hightower and Went, that could have been in service to the kingdom, like Barristan, creating the new kingdom, instead they threw their lives away for what I would call a misguided kind of honor. Now, we don't know exactly what happened at the Tower of Joy. Ned's memory is in a fever dream, and he doesn't follow it up in his sober mind. So it's stylized. The time could be compressed. The conversation is very poetic. So did they talk more? Did Ned and Arthur stop at the end of the fight and have more words when they reached a stalemate? Did they work something out? Did Arthur die nobly, but not before Ned promised him something to return Dawn to Starfall? Like, we don't know. There's something more detailed and dramatic that's going to come out about the Tower of Joy. But Arthur Dayne seems to have died there, and he seems to have died as a kind of dead ender. So it says something about suicide by Stark. Yeah. Well, Ned is kind of a badass. We'll talk about Ned. Actually, we'll talk about it now because I don't have it written in. So hang on. I was thinking about the Tower of Joy exchange. Ned is like 17 or 18. He is a badass son of a bitch. Listen to what he says. He steps up to Arthur Dayne, Gerald Hightower, and Oswald Went, and he says, "I looked for you on the Trident." That's a ballsy thing to say. It'd be like, "I looked for you on the battlefield. Where were you?" And he's all like, "Woe to the usurper if we had been there." And he's like, "I would have thought to find you there. I was there killing your men. Me and Robert, we killed Rhaegar. Where were you?" Then Arthur's like, "Now it begins." And Ned's like, "Nope. Now it ends." Dude, Ned Stark. Come on, man. We know him as like the good father. He's 35. He's chill. He's traumatized. But dude, that's some BD energy. You're damn right that is. Now it ends. I'm Arthur Dayne, the greatest knight, the most deadliest knight of Aerys' Kingsguard, and Ned's like, "Now it ends, bitch." Like, dude, that's ice cold. Just want to say that. Ice cold. Ned, by the way, George has clarified, did not have ice with him. Ice is a great sword. It's 5.5 feet long. It's ceremonial. It's not the best weapon for a duel. It's too big. It's like big and cumbersome. You'd have to be Gregor Clegane to wield ice in combat. So, just a heads up. So no, Ned did not fight Arthur with ice. But was Arthur killed with Dawn? In the show, he was. I suspect that may have happened also in the books, where the final fatal blow to Arthur was struck by Ned with Dawn. I think that we know that Howland Reed intervened. We know that Ned would have lost to Arthur. And you imagine they're probably the last two combatants living, because it was only Ned and Howland that survived. And Ned says, "Yeah, Howland saved me, else Arthur would have killed me." So how did Howland Reed? He either used a blow dart or a glamour. We know that they have certain kind of illusion magics in the swamp. So perhaps there was a glamour. I like the blow dart theory. We know they have them. Maybe there's an Achilles heel, some exposed bit of flesh, something like that. In the show, it was just like a knife to the back. I think it'll be more creative. But something interfered. Howland tipped the fight. And Ned did not die, but for Howland. So, was he killed with Dawn? I don't know. For symbolic reasons, I think so. But we'll have to see. And then, yes, again, he does kind of have to be dead because he's very famous looking. So he can't be Mance Rayder or Corrin Halfhand or anybody like that. If he's alive, he would have had to flee to Essos where no one would recognize him. And there's not really a candidate for who he would be over there. So I have to conclude that he is dead. Also, he doesn't need to be alive, really, for any reason that I could think of. So anything else to say about Arthur? You guys have any questions about his sort of character conflicts? Is it possible Ned's group and the Kingsguard only fought because Lyanna was dying? I imagine if she was alive and well, things would have been different. Yeah, potentially. If she could hear, like, Ned can hear her calling out to him from the tower in his dream. If that was real, and he could hear that, then yes, that's going to put some urgency in Ned's step for sure. But these are also two proud and stubborn men that are very determined. So the conversation may have been short, because that's kind of how it goes sometimes when people are like that. Be like, oh, you're in my way? Yep, I'm in your way. Really? Really? Okay, I see how it is. Yep, you do that. And that's it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There might have been more, but no possibility for Arthur using skin changing to hold Dayne in place. Oh, you mean Howland? Yeah, well, yes. Howland potentially could use various kinds of magic. There's a lot on the table. Yeah, it could have been some variant of skin changing. Could have been. Why did it have to end in violence? I think a lot of it is because the stiffness of the vows. You know, our knees do not bend. So, like, once we swore a vow, like, we don't negotiate. Like, and that's what I'm trying to say is, like, that mentality has been incubated by years of turning a blind eye to Aerys' cruelty. So they really cling to those oaths as their anchor of their whole identity. And that's why they can't break them. Howland Reed brought down the Tower of Joy using the same magic in which he moves Moat Cailin. That's not a bad notion, Jamie. It is a little bit of a mystery how Ned and Howland and whatever servants they had pulled down the Tower of Joy. You know, maybe horses and ropes and stuff. Maybe it was already pretty weak. But yeah, that's a good idea. Howland turned the foundations to mud and collapsed it. That'd be sick, actually. In the books, Howland will sneak up and throw a net around him, and he and Ned will kick him to death. Downtown Clowny Brown. That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. All right, so look, I'm going to go get Cleo. She's begging as hard as she can. So have a look at this Bella Bergolts. By the way, Bella Bergolts did this Arthur Dayne and this Ashara. So I'm going to mute the camera and or mute the mic, and you can go ahead and just gaze at Ashara, and then I'll go get Cleo. All right, here she is. Hi, good girl. Oh, she is so much happier now. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Cleo. Hi, girl. Yeah. I was just running the YouTube channel so I could buy you birdseed. How many men could keep the secret about Jon? I don't think people had to die to keep the secret. I think he has to die simply for the sake of his honor. Like, he can't... it's almost like the blood riders that die with the call. You know, like if you're a Kingsguard and your king is dead, you just carry out those last orders until you die. It's a certain mentality. And I'm saying that George is kind of exposing it as being really dumb. That is what I'm saying. He's like, that's the same sort of mentality that leads you to stand outside the room while rape is happening or people are being burned alive. You know what I mean? So, okay, so Ashara Dayne, she was Elia of Dorne's lady at court. She was newly arrived at court as of the tourney of Harrenhal. Her age is calculated as she could have been anywhere from like 14 to 22, I believe is the window at Harrenhal. She is very beautiful. Barristan thinks that Elia's beautiful, but she was a kitchen drab compared to Ashara Dayne. So Ashara Dayne, she is fantasy story beautiful, like Daenerys, okay? And in fact, of course, her eyes remind Barristan of Daenerys' eyes. And that's probably another reason why Dany reminds Barristan of Ashara, is because they are both so beautiful as well with the purple eyes, even though the hair color is different. So, settle down in Theory of Ice and Fire. Most of Ned's dream is going to be right. There's going to be some things that are going to be a little different and some gaps, but it's not going to be like, oh, that was all wrong. Like, no, what Ned remembers is going to be like the more emotional version of what happened. So the time will be compressed, things will be blurry, but it's not going to be like, no, it wasn't anything like that. Like, that's not how it works. So settle down. With respect. So Barristan says that Ashara Dayne was dishonored at Harrenhal and that she turned to Stark or looked to Stark. And the debate is which Stark, Brandon or Ned? Probably Brandon, because Brandon went and talked to Ashara to get her to dance with Ned. So Brandon is obviously the one who's in charge. So if Ashara was in some sort of stressful situation, some troubled situation, and looked to somebody, it probably would have been Brandon. But we don't know that that means that they slept together at all. It just means that she looked to him for some kind of help. What? Where do you want to go? You guys are seeing this, right? Just take your pick, girl. Oh, you want to go in the drawer? Yeah, you can't go in the drawer. I had the drawer open, guys. Sorry. Okay, so dishonored at Harrenhal. What does that mean? Barristan is very stiff and old-fashioned, so it could simply mean that she slept with somebody and Barristan is assuming she was coerced, much like the ridiculous people on Twitter that remove Lyanna's agency and say that Rhaegar groomed her and that she has no agency, even though she's obviously looking at Robert and saying, yeah, he's not faithful. I know who that is. And then chooses another guy. People are like, oh, she was bamboozled. Like, it sounds similar when Barristan says Ashara was dishonored. That could simply mean that Ashara slept with somebody. However, we know that King Aerys did used to have mistresses and used to abuse women of the court. In fact, his wife complained about Aerys turning her maids into whores, if you will, to use an unpleasant word. So we know, and this is earlier in Aerys' life. And supposedly after the birth of Rhaegar, Aerys swore off other women. But he has a track record of abusing women and of having sexual appetites. So, Ashara dishonored at Harrenhal, that could have been King Aerys. He's really the most obvious. If there was an actual dishonoring and some sort of abuse or something that wasn't just Ashara sleeping with somebody, Ares is a prime suspect. A prime suspect. And that could have even resulted in the pregnancy. And that could be a reason why there was a miscarriage, because a lot of Ares's kids were miscarried or stillborn and stuff like that. So that is one theory about what happened there that I think deserves probably more thought. Otherwise, it's just going to be that she slept with somebody and Barristan's like, oh, she was dishonored. But the thing is, did she sleep with somebody when she turned to Stark? Or did she sleep with somebody when she was dishonored? Like, there's two things that happen there. Something traumatic happens, and then she turns to the Starks for help. And people are thinking that turning to Stark means she slept with Brandon or Ned. But it sounds more like there's some dramatic situation that she's involved in. And she's looking to the Starks for help. Because think about what the Starks have been doing. Lyanna defended Howland, right? And then they took Howland into their tent and sort of took care of him. Now, In Deep Geek's theory about this, which I like, and you can check this video out with confidence. It's an older one of his videos, so it uses human art. Not to keep pounding that drum, but yes, his theory on Ashara is very good. And his theory is that essentially she had a romance with Howland, and that the Starks helped hide that because the Crannog men are very looked down upon. So if she is pregnant with Howland's kid and they're not married, that's very dishonorable, quote unquote. And so she may have looked to the Starks being the ones protecting Howland to help her in her situation. And that help may have been to help her run off to the swamp with Howland and fake her own death. But we'll talk about that theory in a bit. But she's definitely involved at Harrenhal. So and yeah, Jenny of Oldstones, you're right. Brandon was known as a womanizer, but not an abuser. There's never any implication that he is abusive or dishonorable, just that he likes to sleep around. So, yeah. Although we don't know, we don't really know. But yeah, it's not implied. So that is one possibility, is that she's involved with Howland. But she's also Elia's lady, so she could be a go-between between Rhaegar and Lyanna, or the Starks and Rhaegar. And again, Ned is going to Starfall after the Tower of Joy and returning Dawn. And Arthur is Rhaegar's best friend. So it's like Rhaegar's wife, Elia, Ashara is her lady. So Ashara and Arthur are very much tied to Rhaegar, Elia, the Starks, potentially, Howland, and Lyanna. So they know a lot about what's going on. The question is, what role did Ashara play? I think the whole thing with Ned is a cover story. I don't think Ned and Ashara had a romance. I think Ned had a crush on Ashara, and Brandon asked Ashara to dance with him. But why would Brandon do that? Like, why would Brandon have the rapport to do that? It's more likely that Brandon and Ashara had a romance, if any Starks did, than Ned. That's like a pity move. And on top of that, Ned just doesn't seem the type, right? Like, there's every reason to see that Ashara is a red herring mom for Jon in case Jon comes out looking Valyrian looking. So the idea that, by the way, Ellaria Dayne tells Ned Dayne, who tells Arya, that Ned and Ashara were in love. And Harwin also thinks that, whose father served with Ned. So the story is out there. Ned and Ashara. It's all over the place. It's in Starfall, and it's on the lips of Ned's men. And I swear to God, I think this is a cover story that's been crafted so that if Jon looks this is the main thing that Ned is worried about. hiding Jon from Robert. So what if he looks Targaryen? Hair color changes, eye color changes in the first few years of life. Dark gray eyes could develop a little bit of purple. Black hair on a baby's head might develop a blonde. There might be a blonde streak in there. Maybe the baby's bald. Like, the whole thing with Ashara provides a cover story for how Jon might have Valyrian looks and not be Targaryen. So it is a very important part of Jon taking Ned. And for that, or Ned taking Jon. And for that reason, I do not think that Ned and Ashara had a romance. I also think that Ned is just loyal. He just got married to Kat, and I think the whole story is interesting because Ned is letting people think he had a bastard when he wouldn't really do that. That, to me, is who Ned's character is. So potentially Brandon may have had a romance with Ashara Dayne, but it could have been Howland instead, and people assumed it was Brandon because Ashara was in that tent with the Starks looking for protection. That's In Deep Geek is saying, like, people go into the tent and then people make up rumors, and no one would think that Ashara was going for Howland because he's a lowly Crannog man. So it must have been Brandon. But really, Brandon was helping them come up with a cover story to escape to the swamp. So check out In Deep Geek's video about that. But who would she be looking for protection from? Aerys. That's what I'm saying. If Aerys abused her or even raped her, then what do you do if the king rapes you? Like, who can protect you from the king? That's a bad situation to be in. The Starks might be someone that you turn to. They're in the north. They're a separate power. They're protecting people. And there may have been another connection there too. So Rhaegar would be the other one that you would look to for protection, but maybe you would think you couldn't because he's Aerys' son. So that's why I think the idea that it was Aerys that dishonored her has some legs, because it creates a situation where she really is looking to somebody else to protect her and might need to just disappear. So all right. The thing about it is that there's other mysteries too. She had a stillborn daughter, or maybe that's Illyria Dayne, or maybe that's Mira, or maybe that's Jon, if you like that theory. They all were born at the same time. It could be Dany. Some people think that would be Dany. But she had a kid right around that time when everyone else was having kids. Now, there is no body for Ashara Dayne. She leapt into the sea. It's not said. Well, it's not said that her body was never recovered. It's just not said whether it was or not. But maybe it never was recovered. So maybe she's alive. All right, so moving on. Let's talk about Lord Edric Dayne. Hang on a second. Let me put Cleo on the branch. This artwork is by Gen Z, and this is not specifically Edric. I think it is intended to be him. It's a little older than him, and you can tell he's helping a wounded man in a stream, but it's not Beric, because that guy's got a Dane sigil too. But this is close to the situation of Edric and Beric in the stream. So I decided to use it for Edric. But again, the artist is Gen Z. And it's just labeled as like died and reborn or something like that. So Edric is shy and nice, like I said. He is uneffacing. He is very polite. He approaches Arya kind of tentatively, and when he's trying to tell Arya about Ashara and Ned supposedly being in love, he does it very delicately. And when she's upset, he's sensitive to her feelings. So you could tell he's a nice kid. And like I said, he's somewhat experienced. He hasn't killed anyone, but he has been living in a cave, and he has been squiring for Beric in combat. So for a 13 to 14-year-old young lord of a castle,